Went out truck shopping this morning. I really wasn't ready for what I found. So I looked at a pair of trucks as I was driving by the Kenworth dealer in Sioux Falls. I saw a couple of Peterbilts there backed against the fence, was their used truck line. And there was two 389s back there. One was an 18 and one was turned out to be a 2022. And it was very interesting what I discovered. And let this be a cautionary tale for guys searching to buy trucks, because I'll tell you right now, wasn't anybody ready for this. I'm out here in Holly Springs, Mississippi right now. Got to wait a couple more hours to leave. I got to deliver it down the road a ways at 2. Just checking my trailer out. But so the two trucks, well, they were kind of unique in the fact that I've been looking for a new truck and I got a solid offer on mine, so I decided now's the time to start looking. So I get there a little early. I go, salesmen aren't in, so I come back and go out and look at the first one. Now, the first one, when the salesman wasn't there, I went and looked and realized that this was a brand new truck. Total glass dash, all that. I don't think it had hauled anything. In fact, turns out it hadn't hauled anything. But what more was, I knew where the truck came from, and I knew what the company the truck came from, and something was way off. We had to start buying trailers with rub rails on them because shag drivers are just tearing them up left and right. These trailers are getting just beat up. You got with the price of them. It's sad we had to start doing that, but yep. The humidity today is at about infinity. It's not bad outside. I mean, what is the temperature outside? It says it's 82 and the humidity is at about 1,000. I walked over to the Walmart next door today, and well, I come back just thinking I needed another shower. So the first truck, I opened the door, and both the doors were unlocked on both the trucks, and no salesmen were there yet, but I realized this truck came from the place I used to work at. And I was like, this is weird. It's like, well, maybe it's 2 or 3 years old. I opened the door, see the full glass dash, and I was like, this ain't new. This ain't an old truck. This is a newer truck. Look at the code, realize it was a 2023. Weird. And the truck next to it was that I was looking at was a 2018. So I really didn't climb into the brand new truck. New truck's a new truck. It's sterile and all that. But it was pretty stripped. It had a very basic, that real cheap chrome bumper on the front that everybody replaces, and had the glass instrument cluster, and there was literally nothing on this side, which you get that much space of nothing is kind of pointless. So I go in and I start talking to the salesman when he got there. So we go look at that truck. That truck has 500 miles on it. So my first thought is, why would a company get rid of a truck at 500 miles? Well, there's like, maybe they didn't take delivery of it. I know they took delivery of it because it had the company mud flaps on it, and chances are it was stickered up. So with 500 miles, I know where they buy their trucks. From where they buy their trucks in Wisconsin to the terminal to Sioux Falls is right at 500 miles. This thing never hauled a load, and the odometer proves it. So why? I couldn't tell you, but I had some speculations and I did make some phone calls. Now, if you're wondering why this video is a little disjointed, it's because it is. Sometimes I don't get these things all shot in one shot, and it takes a couple of days because, well, sometimes I'm like a squirrel on crack, really. But so yeah, so I'm in the budding metropolis of Portillo, Arkansas. Apparently it's foggy. Yeah, that's better. It's yeah, a little humid out tonight, but this is the place to be apparently in this town. It's the only thing open. Anyhow, so I still know people at my last job, so I decided to go call them up and ask them if they heard anything. And they hadn't heard much, but what they did hear was there was a whole bunch of trucks that went back. I said, why is that? He said electrical issues. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, so I called up another friend of mine who was a mechanic there. I asked him the same exact questions. And I just like to work out a mystery, because really I will never figure out the total story of this unless I talk to somebody in the company, and we all know that's not happening. So I asked him and I said, wouldn't it make sense if these were brand new trucks still under warranty, why didn't they just go back to Peterbilt there where they got them? Nobody can answer that. These trucks, brand new, never had a mile put on them hauling freight, and it's on the used truck line at Kenworth. That's a giant red flag. What made this truck so bad that a company that I know desperately needs trucks was willing to can it and not send it back, despite the fact that it's brand new, and yet wholesale it out to a Kenworth dealer? And of course they wanted a new price. They wanted $229 for it, and I laughed and said that wasn't happening. It's a used truck. So how did I know it wasn't brand new? I mean, let's take the Kenworth part out of it. How did I know it wasn't brand new? Well, there was a few signs. We got a lot of mosquitoes out tonight. So one of the signs was, I mean, despite the fact that I used to work for that company, it had company mud flaps on it. So that tells me that the truck was delivered, it was striped up, and it sat around for about 8 months, because I looked at the mileage. It had around 500 miles on it. And so what I determined, because like I said, is from where they buy their trucks, it's a little over 300 miles, about 300 miles or so from where they buy their trucks to the shop. And then from Sioux Falls or from their shop to Sioux Falls was the rest of it. And it never had 1 mile put on it hauling freight. And that was just real suspect. So if the truck was that bad that they just go ahead and strip the stripes back off it and send it back to wholesale, that's probably a red flag. You don't want that truck. Nights like this are why I carry bug spray in the truck. One of the dirty little secrets to keeping mosquitoes out is, if you got mosquitoes in your truck and all that, spray down a t-shirt with a bunch of off and all that, and just hang it up right over your bed. And if you get that t-shirt saturated with enough bug repellent, you can sleep pretty peacefully. Thankfully now I don't have to sleep with the windows open anymore, because, well, I got an APU. So yeah, so there may be nothing wrong with that truck at all now. It may have been fixed. There may be nothing wrong with the truck at all. We went through this with a bunch of trucks that got sent back when I worked there. I had one of them, and what it all came down to was a programming problem that they were told would work by a salesman, and it didn't. And there was about 45, 50 trucks, and they got in a fight with Peterbilt, and Peterbilt just took them all back, because the program was supposed to work. But truthfully, everything was fine on the truck. I did 120,000 miles on that truck without a hitch, until they reprogrammed it with this great new efficiency program, and it went down. So it could be a number of things, but truthfully, they wanted too much for the truck, and there's too many unknowns here. That's just kind of where I was at with that. So that was just a big red flag. Why is a brand new truck on the used line at a Kenworth dealer, especially a Peterbilt? If you see that, that's not a deal. Something was wrong. So ask some questions. So let's go to the next truck, because this was really bad. So I get looking at the other truck. Turns out it's a 2018 389. It's got the carriage style headlights put on it. It's a long nose. It's been dolled up. Well, it was dolled up, but it was a little rundown. It was a little more rundown than I would have liked for $131,000. 578,000 miles on it. I could tell they were hard, and but it hadn't been deleted. It had pretty much the same exact interior I got here, and so I was like, oh, it had the updated smart nav too, and I like that. So I'm like, okay, 131,000. It's a little. You can tell the truck had been rode hard and put away wet. But then I started noticing a few other little things, which, when you're looking at used trucks, you're going to do that. You're going to nitpick, and sometimes those are bargaining things. Sometimes those don't mean anything. But we'll get to that. Now, I didn't bother starting the 2023 because there was no point in starting it up. I wasn't going to buy it. I knew exactly how it was set up, and when we checked the specs, it was exactly what they set up. 13 speed, 450 horse, very, very vanilla truck. And for $229,000, they thought they were adding sprinkles. No, you're gonna need to add some more sprinkles than that. It was just stripped down basic. It was very generic. In fact, it had the glass dash, and it was just a flat blank panel over here, which I was like, wow, that's boring. So I get looking at this truck, and he gives me the key. I check the voltage, just looks fine. So I go to turn it, bam, bam, bam. I'm like, he's like, I can get the jump box. I'm like, that don't sound like the jump box. What it sounded like was when my truck was hydro locking. Yeah, that plays into it later. So I can't get it, and I just hit it, and the low voltage hasn't gone off yet. So I turn it off, look at the voltage. Now, here's the thing. When the low voltage buzzer comes on, there should always be enough amperage to fire the truck up. I've never had it not work. For some reason, somebody turned the low voltage buzzer off on this, and thankfully I got an APU now. But it wouldn't start. I'm like, no. I said, let's pop the engine. So, but before I went and looked at the engine, I checked out the inside. One of the things I noticed was that these guys had really tried hard to polish a pig. This thing was a turd. Polish a turd. Yeah. Yeah. I got that wrong twice. And you could tell that they'd just done a quick job. There was no care given. You could also tell that the truck had been very heavily smoked in. They had done a pretty good job ozoning it out and cleaning it, but there were cigarette burns in the seat, and it was just generally worn. So I know I've seen this truck before, and I'm wanting to say it was a bull wagon or a flatbed, but I can't be sure. But it had a huge drop visor on it, and so I get talking to the salesman, and I said, well, if I buy this, I said, that's gone. I said, the windshields need to be replaced, and you got to take the drop visor off to do it. It was one of those. That's why he hadn't replaced it. And this guy, the truck got worse as we dug into it more. So I'm looking around, and you can see the nicotine smeared all over everything with a coat of armor all over it. But it wasn't worn out. I was going to have to eventually put seats in it and do something like that because it was just used. But you could almost tell that there'd been no real care in its use, and it's like, So I decided to go out and look at the engine. So we pop the hood, I go and I look at the engine, and first thing I notice is there's a puddle of oil under it. Oil pan's leaking. Like, where's that oil coming from? I get luck hoping it's not the turbo. Well, I can just see it just coming right out of the oil pan. And I looked at the salesman and said, that's going to have to get fixed. I said, there's several things here that are a problem. He's like, well, you know, being as this is a consignment, he said, you know, there's going to have to be some money. You're going to have to split the cost of some of these repairs. And I was like, I understand that. But I got thinking, I said, you know, there's certain things that need to be DOT legal and fixed before I ever buy the truck. The oil leak, that's DOT. It's dripping on the ground. There was a puddle this big under it. Can't have that. The windshield, the crack, despite the fact that the crack had no intersecting lines, it was this, that, and the other thing, it was right across the driver's vision. So it was too far down, too far up, and right there. So we're just going to have to replace the driver's side window. And I said, you know, at 570 some thousand, from what I'm looking at right now, I said, honestly, I'm going to have to go have the DEF system cleaned. I was saying, you know, I'm probably going to end up spending probably $3,000-$4,000 extra just prepping the truck for delivery. I said, but that right there and that right there has to go. And then I got looking at something, and something caught my eye, and it was the overflow tank. Well, the overflow tank had splotches in it. And I was like, wait a minute, something ain't right. Because I've had oil in my overflow tank, and that wasn't oil. It looked like what I thought it might be is a little bit of algae or something like that. Of course, I don't know if algae grows in antifreeze. I've never seen that happen. Or a little bit of trash, but I said for 578,000 miles, it shouldn't have that. So the first thing I did was just climb up, pop the cap, and I was not ready for what I found. So I pull the cap off, stick my finger inside, swoop, and it comes out. It's not slimy, it's not oily, it's gritty. And I get looking at it, and I realize that all around the edges, all of this stuff has a greenish tint to it. And I suddenly realized that this truck is full of block sealer. And I was like, son of a gun. This guy is trying to consign a turd, get all the money. And it was very dishonest. Nobody knew anything about this. I got looking at it going, this ain't a $131,000 truck. This is a $40,000 truck that I'm going to have to put $40,000 in. I was beside myself. And, you know, truthfully, with all the stuff it needed, I was ready for the DEF stuff. I was ready for the overhead. I was ready for all that stuff it was going to need, because these are things the truck needs at that mileage. But when the truck is full of block sealer, that's intentional. That's somebody trying to hide a problem so they can shove it onto somebody else and then screw them out of money in the process on top of it. This was just one of the most dishonest things. And now mind you, this was not Kenworth doing this. This was a consignment truck that they were selling for somebody. And I looked right to salesman and said, no, hell no. This is block sealer. And that's what Ultra Copper does, or one of the other block sealers that is copper based, is when it gets wet, it oxidizes. And when it oxidizes, it turns fluorescent green. And that's exactly what it was doing. And I was like, this engine's junk. So here's what I think happened. What I think happened is the guy looked at the miles. It was out of warranty. He realized he couldn't fix it, and he decided it was time to dump it. It's that simple. But instead of being honest about it, they filled it up with block sealer, got it running, and took it straight over to the dealer to consign it out. That clunking was hydro-locking. The more I thought about it, full of block sealer, and it sat a few days, that's absolutely it. You got a cylinder that filled up with water. So that's scary right there. So, you know, if I was in this truck for $40,000, I'm looking at probably another $25 to $30 just to get it out of the shop. you know, and that's not counting any of the while you're in there parts. And truthfully, if I was to do that, we don't know if it's got a cracked head, a dropped cylinder. It wasn't making oil, so I have a feeling it was probably just in the head. But when you start doing major machine work on heads, everybody knows that you either get it or you don't. Either it works fine forever or you end up blowing a head gasket once every 7 months. It's just, there's no in between here. And that's one of those things that you got to consider. So I just kind of had to back away from it, and I took the guy's card and I told him what I was actually looking for. I'm looking for a mid-roof Kenworth. I'd like a 660, but a 680 is probably what I'll end up with. And the reason I want a mid-roof is where I live, you can't sell a condo to save your hind end. Nobody wants them. And it's apparent that nobody wants them because they got yards and yards and yards full of them. So, yeah. But what got this whole thing started was I got a real offer on my truck. I keep my truck as meticulous as I can because it has to make me money. When something goes down, I spend the money, I buy the right part. You wouldn't think so looking at the cars I drive, but I really do my best to keep this thing going with the best parts I can buy. It doesn't ever lack for anything. If they think something's wrong, I just tell them to fix it, just because, well, you have to, you know. This is how you make your money. So that's what I do. When something breaks, I fix it. And everybody knows that. And the guy that's interested in buying my truck, he knows that too. He knows I've got an engine in it. He knows I've done all this work to it. He knows I keep it up. So he's not afraid to buy it. And I've had several people say they wouldn't be afraid to buy it. So, you know, reputation is a good thing, but if they see you taking care of your equipment, you shouldn't have a hard time selling it because, well, people know you took care of it. And if something breaks after they buy it, they're not going to be mad because, well, it's a 10-year-old truck. But I got a fair offer for it, and we'll see what pans out. But right now I'm busy looking for another truck. But this was kind of a tale of two trucks. One of them, they both kind of shocked me, and on both extremes, you know. The 2023, you know, that just didn't make sense at all. And I've talked to a couple guys about that were from that company, and they can't figure it out either. Excuse me. It's been a long day. But the 2018, you know who you are. There was no excuse for that. You know, there was just no excuse for that. And that's just, what you're doing was wrong and what you're doing was fraud. And that's all I got to say about that. I mean, you can't say he didn't know that the engine was going out because it's full of block sealer. So I sincerely hope that wherever that truck goes, it either goes to somebody well deserving of it, or the person who gets it has the means to do it right. I don't like things like that because a lot of people end up getting hurt in the process. But I will tell you a funny story about that before we go. A buddy of mine was telling me about a guy he knows who kind of a shyster. Had a truck that was on its way out. He just wanted to get rid of it. Well, another guy had a truck that guy wanted to sell, get rid of, so they decided to trade with a little bit of cash. So that guy sold him a truck that ended up blowing up like 3 weeks later, and he sold him a truck that ended up blowing up like a week later. So each guy thought he was giving the other guy a lemon, and they just ended up screwing themselves. It's kind of you kind of get what you got there. It kind of made me laugh when he told me that both these guys thought they were trying to slick the other one and ended up screwing themselves in the process. So, yeah, what have you. Anyways, guys, it's just a cautionary tale. When you find a truck, do your homework. Take pictures of the engine numbers. If you can find somebody that can run those numbers and give you a diagnostic breakdown of the engine and all the updates, repairs, stuff like that, those are fabulous when it comes to, you know, determining the health of an engine. Get printouts of the last 10 burns, the pressures, all that. Especially with these ignition systems, do your due diligence, and it will save you a lot of money in the end. But simple things like just checking the coolant and starting, you know, like I said, a weak starter will sound one way, a weak battery will sound one way, but when a starter hits that hard and won't start, that's a problem. Something's locked up, and I have a feeling it was hydrolocked. So just be careful, guys. There's a lot of sharks out there, and the 2023, I think that was just something nobody wanted to mess with. That's just the best we can come up with here. I'll never know the whole story of that, but the other one, that was a con artist trying to shove a truck on somebody unsuspecting and trying to get all the money out of while doing it. You know, 389s are cool, especially the long nose, and this was a pretty truck. But I'll tell you right now, you're going to be in 50 large right off the bat with this pretty truck if you bought something like that. So do your due diligence, do your homework. You know, it's not as hard as you think. And the salesman, they'll help you out with it if you ask them the right questions. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. You guys be safe out there, and we'll see you next video.